Welcome to the Smart Connector podcast. I've got an amazing guest for you today, Niraj Shah. Welcome, Niraj.
Thanks for having me, Jane.
Yeah, so Niraj is a co-founder of Method90 Inc, which is a blockchain company in the sports industry. And Method90 helps sports organizations create powerful new revenue streams and complete new fan engagement opportunities through projects like their patent pending NFT innovation digital seat ownership. Okay, now you might be wondering what all of that stuff is about. You might be wondering what blockchain is about, what NFTs are all about, and we're going to get into that in this episode, demystify it all for you. But anyway, a little bit more about Niraj. So, lucky to recover from a sudden serious stroke at just 30 years old, which is amazing that you made your way back from that. So, Niraj has been trying to make the most of life ever since. So, today he's a serial entrepreneur and investor with experience across property technology, peer-to-peer finance, wellness technology, crypto, and NFTs. And his other interests include travel, snowboarding, yoga, meditation, optimizing health, brain mind function, and making cocktails. That's so much fun. That's a great hobby
Yeah.
to have, Niraj.
hmm
Okay, so let's get into it. So first of all, blockchain and NFTs. That's those are buzzwords that a lot of people are talking about at the moment, and a lot of people don't really understand what they are. So first of all, and before we get into it, Niraj, I just wanted to ask you, what makes you so passionate about the potential of these technologies?
Yeah, it's a great question, and thanks for that introduction. I must add also that I don't really have much of a social life outside of all of those other things that I'm into. I think for me, it's such a good question, and the answer is really simple. In the late '90s, when at the start of the commercial internet, sort of '95 onwards, I saw that in my late teens as a university student, and I was really into technology, and I was learning about computers, learning how to do a bit of programming, but I felt I was too young to really participate in that. So I ended up interning at .com in the first era and saw the absolute madness. Had a little bit of student money left over at the end of the year, put that into a couple of tech stocks, watched it go up, then watched it crash when that crash happened. And I think there's some serious parallels between what's happening today and what happened then. And I'd say that we're almost in that sort of mid to late '90s phase with this new technology where there's a lot of buzz, there's a lot of hype, there's a lot of money going into the space. They're starting to get to the mainstream, just like those .coms did. And likewise, I do think that there will be a crash, that there is a lot of very frothy activity in the space. But what will emerge from that, because if we think about all the promise of the early internet, it was about every company is going to have a website and we're going to do, we're going to buy things on the internet. And what was being said at that time by people pitching these things was, well, nobody's going to put a credit card in the internet. Who's going to do that? And lots and lots of famous quotes like, "Is the internet a fad?" and so on and so forth. And if we look back on it, everything that it promised came true, but it came true on a 20-year timeline, not in the 2 or 3 years that we thought it was going to. And why that's relevant to what's happening now, this technology underpins the next evolution, because when we cut through these buzzwords, this cocktail party conversation as we see it now, and we get past the headlines that talk about people buying monkey JPEGs for millions of dollars and that kind of thing, what's really exciting about it is blockchain has created a way for us to have digital ownership, provable digital ownership, in the same way that you or I might own a car or a property or something like that. So that's backed up with a legal system, so we can say, yes, I own this property, or yes, I own this car. What The way it works in a digital world, and this is what blockchain and NFTs is all about, is for us to be able to use code to say, yes, I own that digital asset. Now that begs the immediate question, well, who cares? What does it matter if you own that monkey JPEG, because I can right click save it and I own it as well. And that's the bit that I feel is really missing the point, because what it means is, if we can prove digital ownership, then a couple of things can happen. That and that's beyond the fact that these become a place for status symbols, because anyone who's knocking status symbols should really look at what the volume of luxury goods is in things like handbags and those kind of things, because it's the same thing. The functionality is the same as a different bag, but people want that handbag for whatever reason. And it's the same with digital assets in the most basic use case. But beyond that, if we can prove ownership, then it can be a digital access pass or a membership card that unlocks various opportunities both online and in the real world. And that's where it gets really powerful. So if you own this NFT and you can prove that you own this NFT, then maybe it gets you access to that restaurant, or maybe it gets you into that sports stadium or the VIP club at that event or something like that. And there are already real world examples. It's very, very early, but there are already real world examples of that kind of thing happening. And then the other side of that, which makes it exciting, because of course we could do these things through membership cards and whatever, but the difference now is that I could be in, I don't know, Hong Kong, you could be in London, and there might be a digital seat ownership, the thing that we're working on at, I don't know, Tottenham Hotspur or Chelsea or something like that. And I can be the owner of that in a different part of the world, but I might have it listed for sale, and you could be outside the stadium, and 10 minutes before the game, you can see that listed, buy it, and within moments, you can have access to whatever opportunities are associated with that card, whether it's access to the game, whether it's access to the VIP restaurant, whether it's, whatever it is. Does that make sense? I feel like I've rambled on a lot there.
It makes sense. I'm actually getting really excited. My mind is blown already, as I knew it would be.
There is one really important caveat, and I want to get this out early. Just like the internet in the late 90s, the majority of things happening in this space will not succeed. And the reason for that is simple, because startups as a whole statistically don't succeed for lots of reasons. Too early, too late, not enough money, too much competition, no real market need, all that. So that's important. It doesn't mean that everybody in the space is building this way or sees it that way. But the other is that I think over a 5, 10, 15-year period, we'll see some really powerful things emerge, which will become the Apples, Googles, Facebooks of that next era.
Yeah, and I was actually earlier on today, I was recording a piece of content about innovation, and I was using the example of Sky, and how Sky came in and obviously disruptive with its, multi-channel sports offer, the whole model of broadcast television, which was a free model. And so I was just thinking, when you were talking about NFTs and blockchain in sport, I was just kind of imagining how that could converge with kind of all sorts of things to offer an absolutely elite experience for sports fans, and what that could look like, and whether it could be, meet and greet with the players, and I mean, all sorts of things, front seat, all access, all areas passes, and I
Yeah,
can see it. It's very
totally.
exciting.
Access to private training, access to when they come on tour, but also you can replicate all these things digitally, because if you look at the global nature of sports today, like we just had the Super Bowl over in the US. I'm not an NFL fan, but you'd have to be living under a rock to not realize the Super Bowl just happened, because it gets reported everywhere. And so if I was a fan, but I live in the UK, so if I'm a super fan, I might get to 3 or 4 games a year, and that's expensive and whatever. But let's say that my team has is using blockchain and NFT, and they have a meet and greet for 100 people online, or a private audience with the manager or one of the star players, or even an up and coming youth player. That's special, like, because you can't really have that. I mean, you could, of course, you could just do an event on the internet and sell tickets to it, but this is a way of building up fandom through owning these tokens and stacking them, and that kind of thing. So it becomes a bit more equitable, a bit more gamified. It's not as simple as I was the first one who could buy that ticket.
Yeah, yeah. No, I completely understand. And it's in a way sort of adding layers onto that
Mm.
experience of kind
Yeah,
of paid sports
Yeah.
fanship, if you like, where, obviously we can all pay a premium
Yeah.
price to go and watch a boxing match between,
Yeah.
some of the top boxers in the world, but
Hmm.
you're going to be getting the same experience, aren't you, as a lot of other people? And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah. Well, the other side of that, because the danger is that does this just become an elitist thing for those who can afford to do it? But the other side of it is, because I think the broadcast of this, what we're seeing is a shift where the broadcast is becoming increasingly in not it's not in the hands of the clubs in every sport yet, but the clubs are becoming more powerful because there's a realization that they hold the value in this ecosystem, and they're not as reliant on broadcasters as they used to be, because there's so many of them now, and that we've got the internet and broadband speeds and streaming. So eventually they'll have a really big say in it, and they could say, well, we're now going to broadcast our own games, or as a league we're going to broadcast our own games, and it might be on Sky in the UK, and it might be here on wherever, but the club could say, okay, we're now going to have this digital membership. We're going to have 100,000 NFTs, and if you own one of those, you can watch our games, and it can be geographically gated, so it could just be in, just outside the United Kingdom, for example. But again, that's quite exciting, because now somebody can participate, for what might only be 10, 20, $30, which is a lot of money in an emerging market, but it doesn't make sense to do here. But for a club, that's significant, because it could be hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of new revenue, which currently exist as a follow or a like on a social media account, rather than something they can't monetize it, and that fan can't feel any more involved than um, somebody from a distance.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And of course, we've talked a lot about sport, but NFTs also have a very big place in kind of music and creative industries, don't
Mm.
they?
Yeah.
So yeah, how are they being introduced to?
So this one's interesting. So something we haven't touched on: when you've got provable digital ownership, it means that you can have different models of how people are rewarded for creating and participating in that product. So if we take something like Van Gogh, Vincent van Gogh. I said Van Gogh. All my partners are American, but yeah, Vincent van Gogh, as we pronounce it in the UK. Um, I went to a wonderful exhibition of his here in London a few months ago, and what I learned at that exhibition is that he created all these hundreds of amazing paintings that sell for millions, if not tens of millions, if they sell at all now. But he died penniless and poor. Now,
Yeah,
if there was a digital trail using this kind of technology, every time those paintings, and I mean the physical paintings, not necessarily digital, if there's a digital ownership certificate, like your title deeds to your house or something like that. But what we can do, we can program now, every time that gets sold, 10% goes back, or X% goes back to Vincent van Gogh or his family. So imagine if, because of the work he did that he was never rewarded for, now every time one of his painting trades, that his heirs would get millions of dollars. So that you can take that. I think with the creative industries, you can take that analogy and apply it, where now artists are looking at this. And we know that artists have long struggled with the idea of record labels and everybody having their cut. And we hear these stories about how artists get regularly screwed out of their work. And, the way we see it with sports clubs or music artists or whatever, this industry cannot exist without that creator, without that talent. But that talent is not getting an equitable share of what they're creating. So what we can have, and what we're starting to see on the music side, and it is very, very early, and there's a lot of experimentation, but it's this same sort of idea that if an artist puts music out, that instead of going through a record label, they could, I think actually the Kings of Leon did something like this a year ago, and it was widely reported in our circles, but I don't know how much of the mainstream press it made. But this is a really powerful example, that their new album, they released it as normal, but then they released some special editions, and those special editions were NFTs. And I can't remember what all the different ones were. Some were just there's only going to be 500 of these, so it becomes a collector's item. But some of them, I can't remember how many they had. I think they had like 5 or 10 like this, and it was the top level membership, if you like. But if you own this NFT, then you will get 4 front row seats to one Kings of Leon concert every year for the rest of the number of years that they're performing and touring as a band. And if you have that NFT, then you just need to contact them to cash it in for not. You don't lose the NFT. You've bought it so that you have the right to those four front row seats at whichever venue. And that's, again, that's crossing over a little bit into the kind of stuff we're doing, because what we're effectively doing is creating a way to have rights and opportunities on a physical asset, i.e. a seat in a stadium or a seat in a venue, but using digital certification to verify that, so that we know it's the real one and there's only one of them, and it originated from that venue or club or band or whatever.
Yeah. So you could have your own seat in a football stadium, or presumably you could have your own seat in a theatre, in a West End theatre.
Exactly. What we see, and I'm absolutely convinced that the world will go this way, is the ability for you or I to be a landlord in that seat. So if we've got that seat in a theatre or a stadium or a concert venue, we get first option on the tickets in that seat. But if we don't take that ticket, then it gets sold in the market, however it is that those venues or clubs sell their tickets. And every time it's sold, we might get a few percent of that back, that kind of thing. So it's a different level of participation. And I equate it a bit like, it's not that different to the way that leaseholds work in the UK, where you don't own the flat, but you're buying the right to enjoy it exclusively and have certain rights and privileges which are protected by law. And it's that same concept, but now we have the means to do it digitally and globally.
Yeah, I get it. It's very, very exciting. So, I mean, ultimately, I can see that there is a huge, commercial benefit to it, really, because as consumers, it just gives us access to a whole new level of choice, doesn't it? And so I'm sure that this is going to take off. It's just a question of time, isn't it?
Yeah, it's but so we've got global internet, we've got mobile and social connection. So what it means is there's a Cambrian explosion of activity going on, because unlike 20 years ago, where people needed to learn how to get onto the internet and all of those kind of things, it means that if this project does this, then that project happening in a different continent or country can watch it and learn from it and iterate. So we're seeing a ton of experimentation going on, and I think there's absolutely going to be some very new models emerging. There already are some really good examples of things that are working. So I think it is, this aspect of technology is going to touch every industry in the world, and it's already happening. So give you a completely different example. But before I do that, let me just say what I was going to say is it's already happening, but it's not a straight line. So we're not going to see a smooth transition. It's with this kind of stuff, it's bumpy. It goes through dips and troughs. So what will happen at some point in the next, I don't know, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, is that the whole market will crash. The confidence will come out of it. But the people who are building, like us and others, will just keep on building. And then hopefully we're successful, because this is very, very cutting edge. So it's new. It hasn't been done before. But if it's not us, it's going to be someone, because there's no way that I can see that the way that venues and seats work go this way. So that's what I was going to say. But to give you examples of places where it's already working. So a blockchain basically it's like a ledger, like an accounting ledger. And the difference between this ledger is it's independent, so no one party controls it. It's usually transparent, and it's maintained by multiple parties, thousands of computers around the world. And we could get into why and how, but it's probably not that important. The point is, it's proven to be robust. Now, where that becomes really interesting is in things like supply chain, for example. So I think USPS, the US Postal Service, they're already using a lot of blockchain stuff, because instead of having a centralized authority constantly checking where things are or whatever, if all the participants in that network are updating that network, so yes, I received this parcel, yes, it's gone there, then you're creating this third ledger, which is just a more efficient way of doing things because it requires less cost, because it requires less people, infrastructure, that kind of thing. Another really good example, I think, legal transactions are going to go this way because at the moment we've still got. You mentioned early on, I've got experience in real estate finance. I've got a 10-year-old property business, and I still do a lot of property deals, kind of as my side job, if you like. So I work with a lot of lawyers, and the process is still that everything is done with bits of paper. COVID has forced them to come to digital signature and digital identity a little bit, but it's super inefficient. It's very opaque. You never know if one lawyer is telling you the truth about when they submitted what, and this keeps the system very inefficient. But eventually, I think the way it goes is that lawyers on both sides of the transaction and whoever else is involved, the surveyor, the mortgage people, finance, whatever, they're all going to be inputting to one ledger so that we can see what's going on, and then that ledger will then get attached to a transaction, so it becomes a record of what happened. So there's lots of like non-NFT, non-computerized areas where this is going to become relevant.
Yeah, and it's amazing, really, when you think about all the advances in the internet over the last 20 years or whatever, that lawyers who are generally, they're very well paid. It's a very foundational service that they offer that none of us can go throughout our lives, I think, without having some encounters with lawyers, right? It's amazing, really, that they still rely on paper when, as you said, something like this can make it so efficient and so transparent and so fast, really, in comparison.
And the ones who do it, they get competitive advantage. So I'm fortunate. I work with a couple of law firms regularly, and they're quite forward-thinking, quite young partners. So when I started in the space 10 years ago, I started with digital signatures, obviously got lawyers to check it out and make sure that it's robust. And it turns out as digital signature is more robust than a physical signature because it's so easy to forge a physical signature. Whereas with digital signatures, it's a lot harder because you're recording all this other data around the IP, the location, when the file was opened, who opened it, all this circumstantial data, which makes it very hard for someone to argue I did or didn't do that. Digital signatures day one, video viewings remote day one, and at that time, my competition was old men who had been in the game for a long time and didn't like technology, and my customer base was all 24 to 32-year-olds living in big cities, London, Nottingham, that kind of thing, and they just wanted things transparent, fast, easy to do on a mobile. Click a button, check it all, and then I get emailed a copy. And what's amazing, Jane, is 10 years later, that's still not the norm in property. It's happening more now than it was then, but it's mostly younger folks like myself who are coming into this. And then as I was saying, I'm fortunate to work with a couple of law firms who are much more advanced. So most law firms will either want you to come to their office with your ID so they can prove your ID, or
Yeah.
if they think they're sophisticated, they'll let you send a certified ID, which means that I need to go and get another professional to write this is a true likeness of Niraj, blah blah blah. But what's crazy is the way I do it, because I just don't want to work with firms that work that way in 2022, is they have an app, and on that app, which is made by a third party, I think the one that we use is called Third Fort. Got nothing to do with them, don't know anything about them, but I think what they do is amazing. So on this app, I'm using my phone and I'm uploading photos of my ID and then uploading photos of me, and then they want me to say some things and they want me to move my head, and that is such a more robust way of proving identity than and then when it comes to sort of proof of income and all of those kind of things, you've got to upload statements straight from your banking app. And again, in the past, I've come across scenarios where we've been trying to do a deal with someone, and then we've noticed that they've basically, the proof of funds that they've submitted it's not worth the paper it's written on, because they've taken their bank statement and doctored it a little bit, and that kind of thing. So I just, we've gone off on a tangent a little bit, but I think we are talking about advances in technology. And this is not to say that everything in technology is necessarily a good thing, but I think the firms that don't move with these things are going to be left behind, because these other firms are more efficient, their cost base is lower, and they can do a higher volume of deals.
Well, absolutely, inevitably. Yeah, so really, really valuable information. Thank you, Niraj. So what I wanted to talk about now is really Method90 Inc.
Mhm.
And what inspired you to start this business? What's the business all about? Yeah, love to hear more.
Yeah, this was a really unexpected one for me, because I've been into football or soccer for our American cousins my whole life, and actually, really wanted to be involved in the space, but just didn't think it was accessible. So when I really got into blockchain and Web3, I came out of my last business and um, started looking at different areas and started looking at blockchain, and within a day I knew this is where I want to spend the next 5 or 10 years, because once I'd really understood it, I was like, okay, this is really interesting. And then from there, got involved in a few different projects and a few different things, got my hands very, very dirty, got into NFTs relatively early, because I thought it was interesting. And then a friend of a friend had heard that I was in this space, and he contacted me and said, hey, I heard you're looking at all this kind of stuff. I've got an idea. Would you like to have a look at it? And I said, yeah, sure. I'm happy to give you a bit of feedback. And that was my now business partner, a gentleman named Mac Lackey, who's based in the US. And what makes Mac interesting is that he's been in business for about 25 years, and he's built 6 web-based businesses in that time, multiple sports technology businesses, and he's ended up selling them to NBC Sports, Sky, people like that. He was a huge partner of Barcelona in the US. He's still the current partner of Juventus. So he had serious credibility on the sports side, and he basically got me to sign an NDA first, which is fine, and then sent over a document which is a basis for the company we're building now. And when I read it, I just thought, this is ingenious. Not because we're particularly clever, but because this is so clearly where this world of stadiums and sports seats and all that stuff is going to go. So that's how it came about, and we just ended up sort of talking about it quite a bit, and I started advising the company, and then after about 3 weeks of that, it was just a mutual thing. Hey, I need to jump into this full time. So for me, it's been amazing, because it's given me a chance to work in an industry that I found fascinating for a long amount of time, and do it with somebody and a team that has serious credibility in that space. And I think what I'm bringing to the equation is the fact that I've got experience in peer-to-peer finance and NFTs, and I'm very, very deep in Web3 projects. So when I say that I'm interested in NFTs, it's not just that I'm interested. I'm in about 50 different projects at the moment. Like I've bought and sold a lot of these things. So I've got a really good understanding of what's going on. Anyway, what we are doing is we are taking a stadium seat, so a football club, I don't know, Manchester United, 60, 70,000 seats. We're taking those seats and we're creating a new digital asset that's linked one-to-one to that seat. So that's what makes it an NFT. That's what makes it non-fungible, because that seat is not the same as the next seat. It's physically the same, but it has a different identifier, because it's a different seat number, row, location, all that kind of stuff. And by doing that, we're creating this new asset that a club can then sell. So it's kind of like the evolution of a season ticket or a PSL or something like that, where the club can sell that to anyone around the world, and whoever buys it will then have rights and opportunities in that seat. So a bit like a season ticket, but more flexible. But also, those rights and opportunities are not just about going to the game, but they're also, as I mentioned earlier, they would also, every time a ticket is sold in that seat that they're not attending, they'd get a little bit, small percentage of that revenue back. So it becomes more of a participatory thing rather than a passive thing. But then, as we talked about at the top of the conversation, it's about the associated physical and digital opportunities. So it could be access to that club's VIP room. It could be access to, as you said, meet and greet with the players, or private training, or that kind of thing. It can also, like, there's so many interesting things that we can do, because it could also be, if there's 10,000 digital seat owners in that stadium, maybe we do a lottery for 200 of them to win a chance to come to private training, that kind of thing. It can be coupons, so 5 minutes before halftime, everybody who owns a digital seat, who's sitting in that digital seat at that moment, could get airdropped a token saying, come and have a beer at the bar on us, that kind of thing. The first one's on us. So there's so much we can do. And then, as I mentioned, all the online stuff as well, around access to online opportunities. And then I think the bit that really excites us, this is more me waxing lyrical about the vision, but also everybody who owns a digital seat, every DSO, so digital seat owner, in the ecosystem, we can start creating opportunities for them that aren't associated to any club. So, for example, like the Champions League final is a really big occasion. I think because we've got our Genesis drop coming up, and we're going to raffle a pair of Champions League final tickets to the holders of that. So somebody can win a pair of tickets. That's super cool. But in future years, like hopefully starting from 2023, we want to be in a position where we can throw a party in that city for all the digital seat owners. So if they own a digital seat at any football club in our ecosystem, that's their entry into that party, and we make sure that it's like the most fun screening of the Champions League final, that kind of thing. So that's where we're up to. If anyone wants to find out more, they can go to dso.co, dso.co, and find out a lot more. We are super early stage. We're talking to a bunch of clubs. We're talking to a bunch of European football clubs, a few American sports clubs, and there's a couple that I can't say who they are, but they tour the world, and that could be quite interesting, because when you think about sports like that who tour the world, they've never really had season tickets before. But if we can create something digital that gets you access in that city, and that city, and that city, and that city, and if you don't want to go or can't go, then you're still getting something back for that. Like that's where we see it going.
Yeah, it just sounds absolutely amazing. I am so excited, really. And I just wanted to thank you, Niraj, for coming and, sharing all your wisdom and experience with our viewers and our listeners today. It really has been an absolutely amazing interview. And yeah, thank you. So what's the best way for people to get in touch with you? Obviously, you mentioned your address, but could people reach out to you on LinkedIn, or where's the best?
Of course. So I mentioned the web address. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can email me directly on niraj@dso.co. I think if you drop that in the show notes, that might be easier, because I have an unusual name. But yeah, no, happy for anyone to reach out, ask questions. But on the website as well, we're adding a lot more there now in terms of frequently asked questions and all of those kind of things. And then the other thing I'd say, for us, anyone who wants to come on this journey with us or watch this journey, we're happy for you to come along. There's no pressure to get involved or to buy any of this stuff. But if they sign up at dso.co, then they'll start getting our emails. And what we found with Web3 and with blockchain and NFTs, you have to experience it to understand it. It's very hard to understand conceptually. So, not just us, but it's a good idea to, get onto a couple of mailing lists and just start learning about the space. Because once you start seeing how people are talking about it, and what companies are actually doing in the space, then
Yeah,
the penny
well,
drops very quickly. Yeah.
amazing. Well, thank you so much again, Niraj. It's been absolutely amazing. Thank you very much for joining us, and I look forward to progress. Bye for
Amazing.
now.
Jane, thank you so much for